Dan Bongino approached the recording device today, asserting he would demonstrate she was the most significant charlatan in the history of government. He spoke with a level tone as though reciting a forecast or presenting a fundamental reality that everyone present would inevitably accept. The House Oversight Committee chamber fell into a heavy hush, while every lens, journalist, and assistant remained perfectly motionless in place. Subsequently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez chuckled with a rehearsed air rather than out of anxiety, resembling something honed before a looking glass. It was a sneer implying this individual was far below her status, designed specifically to resonate on social media platforms and reels. Anticipating a spectacle, she moved toward her headset, while her high-end designer jacket reflected the overhead lights with perfect precision. Her staff chose that specific garment for its visual impact after dedicating nearly an hour to her cosmetics earlier that morning. This was intended to be her breakthrough, yet another digital snippet featuring her dismantling a witness from the opposing political party. She wondered aloud how a former officer turned media personality could possibly attempt to lecture her regarding the nature of deception. She halted momentarily for dramatic impact, scanning the assembly with a look of staged skepticism and theatrical disbelief. What comes next? Will you attempt to hawk gold currency or perhaps survival rations for the impending end times? Sparse chuckles erupted from the liberal side of the gallery, while several aides retrieved their devices to record the expected humiliation. She felt entirely in her element because this was her specialty, and it defined her public persona as a leader. She was the celebrated queen of retorts, a digital combatant representing the voice of a specific modern generation. Perhaps you ought to return to shouting into a device for disgruntled elderly people, she remarked with a sharp edge. She suggested that the serious legislative tasks should be left to those who truly comprehend the nuances of public policy. Further laughter ensued as an assistant offered her a gesture of approval from the sidelines of the hearing room. Bongino remained motionless, sitting still with his fingers interlaced upon the desk, while observing her performance with quiet patience. He watched with the composure of a professional who had served over a decade in the executive security detail. Having guarded world leaders and confronted legitimate perils, he had mastered the art of waiting for the right moment. The amusement died down, and the quiet lingered until Ocasio-Cortez's grin wavered for a split second from the tension. She lacked experience dealing with adversaries who offered no visible emotional response to her provocations and theatrical displays. Her strength was derived from the reactions of others because she required them to sustain her momentum and public image. "Are you finished?" Bongino inquired with a voice that was flat, steady, and completely unimpressed by her words. "I have barely begun, tough guy, as you embody everything that is wrong with this country," she replied. Bongino reached down to unfasten his satchel, which was made of weathered leather and served a purely functional purpose. "As do I," he replied, while producing a single folder that was neither bulky nor particularly dramatic in its appearance. It was a standard manila document holder featuring a simple typed sticker on the front cover for identification. He placed it upon the desk, angling it so every lens in the chamber could capture the text clearly. The sticker identified Ocasio-Cortez as a deception, causing a stir and murmurs to echo through the seating gallery. $47 million, Bongino stated, allowing those specific figures to linger in the stagnant air of the hearing room. He did not hurry his delivery, giving the numbers ample time to be fully processed by the listening crowd. That was the sum of capital that moved through her network of limited liability companies over a 4-year period. $47 million had been collected from individuals who placed their absolute trust in her mission and political goals. He unsealed the folder, claiming he possessed knowledge of where every cent was directed and every lie told. He looked directly at her with steady, certain eyes, claiming that by the end of the day, everyone watching would know too. He produced the initial paper, suggesting she should have remained a bartender because it was at least an honorable profession. Ocasio-Cortez prepared to offer a retort, as she usually did, but found herself momentarily unable to find the words. For the first time in her public life, she sat in silence as Dan Bongino began his methodical presentation. He turned to the first part of the file with the patience of someone who had built cases against international cartels. Every movement he made was intentional, and every silence was timed for the greatest impact on those observing the proceedings. "Let us commence with something basic," he stated, proposing they discuss the reality of her daily living standards. Ocasio-Cortez rolled her eyes with a practiced look of boredom and dismissal for the benefit of the cameras. She commented that the obsession with her wardrobe was unoriginal and lacked any creative insight from the opposing side. "It is not your attire, Congresswoman, but the gap between your sermons and your actual lifestyle choices," he countered. He produced a rental contract, noting her frequent speeches regarding the necessity of affordable housing as a basic human right. She often claimed that families were being ruined by high costs and forced to choose between nourishment and shelter. He laid the document on the table, noting her residence in a luxury Washington, D.C. building costing $3,500 every month. This facility included a pool on the roof, a modern gym, and 24-hour service for its high-paying residents. He noted that her rent exceeded what most households in her own district earned during an entire month of labor. Ocasio-Cortez shifted her weight, a subtle change caught by the lenses despite her attempt to maintain a neutral posture. She argued that such costs were standard for the Capitol and that legislators were required to maintain two separate homes. Bongino produced a spreadsheet highlighting numerous available units within 2 miles of the Capitol building that were much cheaper. He pointed out many options under $2,000 and even some under $500 that would suit a modest lifestyle perfectly. He noted she chose the luxury option with amenities her constituents would likely never experience in their own lives. He mentioned that her monthly rent surpassed what many of her voters earned in 6 weeks of full-time employment. He paused, stating there was no shame in success, but there was a problem with criticizing others while living luxuriously. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she dismissed him with an impatient wave of her hand. Bongino moved to the next piece of evidence to discuss the Green New Deal, her most famous legislative proposal. He held up a thick document, reminding her that she called climate change an immediate threat to human existence. She had claimed humanity had only 12 years to act, or the planet would face an unavoidable and catastrophic end. She insisted that every citizen needed to change how they traveled, consumed goods, and conducted their daily lives. He produced a record showing she took 66 flights in 1 year, all of which were first or business class. The audience reacted as he noted her personal carbon footprint exceeded that of 20 average American families combined. He pointed out she wanted others to give up cars and meat while she enjoyed the comfort of premium travel. Ocasio-Cortez grabbed her microphone, her voice rising in pitch as she claimed the flights were strictly for official business. Bongino produced a photograph from February 2021 showing her at a beach in Miami while Texas suffered a freeze. The image depicted her with a glass of champagne on a cabana while her constituents faced severe winter emergencies. He noted she was at a fundraiser at a mansion while her colleagues were busy organizing relief efforts elsewhere. He mentioned the photo was deleted by a friend, but reminded her that nothing truly vanishes from the internet. He showed another image from 2 days later where she was back in New York tweeting about climate justice. He looked at her with pity, remarking that the champagne on the beach must have been quite enjoyable. Her face turned red with anger as she claimed the trip was previously scheduled and attempted to move on. Bongino interrupted, disinterested in excuses, as he was focused on building a comprehensive case against her public image. He mentioned her support for defunding the police and her claims that communities did not need armed officers. He spread out documents revealing she spent over $70,000 on personal private security over the last 2 years. He noted these were trained professionals with firearms hired to keep her safe, while she told mothers they were unnecessary. She argued that she received credible threats to her life and that her situation was fundamentally different from others. Bongino's voice became stern as he mentioned that mothers and the elderly in her district face real threats daily. He pointed out the only difference was they could not afford 5-figure sums for private armed protection. The room was silent as Bongino produced complaints filed by her own staff with the Office of Congressional Ethics. He read statements claiming she demanded total loyalty, but treated her assistants like personal servants with no respect. One quote alleged she preached about workers' rights, but ran her own office like a sweatshop with unpaid hours. Another claim suggested she had two personas, the caring public figure and the private one who screamed at subordinates. He concluded that the supposed champion of the working class failed to treat her own employees with basic decency. Ocasio-Cortez's voice cracked as she dismissed the complaints as unsubstantiated claims from unhappy former employees who felt slighted. Bongino countered that these were sworn statements made under penalty of perjury by people who once believed in her. He closed that section of the folder, calling her lifestyle hypocritical and a pathetic proof of her lack of conviction. He then opened a denser section, suggesting the focus would now shift toward actual potential criminal activities. He paused to build tension, knowing this information had the potential to end her political career permanently. He focused on the $47 million that moved through her political network, showing a complex web of connected organizations. He named Brand New Congress, Justice Democrats, and Courage to Change as entities involved in moving money in circles. Ocasio-Cortez attempted a dismissive laugh, claiming these were legitimate groups supporting progressive candidates across the entire country. Bongino held up a diagram, offering to explain the money flow simply for everyone watching the broadcast at home. He showed how small donations from working people were moved into private companies for vague campaign services. He identified a company controlled by her former chief of staff as a primary recipient of these campaign funds. He noted the money went in a circle from donors to PACs to private firms and back to her inner circle. He produced records showing over $1 million in payments that could not be properly accounted for or defined. He mentioned that the FEC had been investigating these arrangements for years, but remained deadlocked along partisan lines. He warned that the FBI did not have that problem and had been observing the situation very carefully. The room became very still as Bongino brought up her partner, Riley Roberts, and his involvement in the finances. He noted that her campaign paid Roberts $6,000 every month for marketing consulting, despite his background being in web development. He calculated that over $72,000 of donor money went to her boyfriend for services that left no physical record. He challenged her to show any campaign strategy or marketing work that her partner had actually produced for the money. She claimed he provided valuable digital strategy, but Bongino noted his name only appeared on payment records. He then introduced the story of Maria Gonzalez, a single mother in the Bronx who worked 2 jobs. He described her life of cleaning buildings and working at a laundry for $14 an hour with no benefits. In 2018, Maria donated $50 to the campaign, which represented an entire day of her hard-earned wages. She believed in the message and saw a leader who looked like her and understood her daily struggles. Bongino noted that Maria's sacrifice helped pay for her boyfriend's $6,000 monthly fee for doing absolutely nothing. Ocasio-Cortez blinked back tears as she called his narrative a gross mischaracterization of how campaign finance operates in reality. Bongino produced an email from her personal account to her chief of staff regarding hiding the source of transfers. The email instructed him to make sure the transfers did not look connected, so small donors would not know. He argued this was not an accounting error, but a direct instruction to hide the truth from her supporters. He noted the money was funding her inner circle and personal lifestyle rather than a revolution for the people. He stated that $4.2 million of donor money went directly to entities controlled by her or her close associates. He let that figure sit in the air before moving to a section he described as even darker. He held up the famous photo of her crying at the border fence, which had launched her into icon status. He then produced a different photo taken minutes before showing her laughing and checking her makeup in a phone. He suggested her grief was a performance that lasted exactly as long as necessary for the cameras to capture it. He read a text from her communications director about positioning photographers and having tissues ready to manufacture the emotion shot. He also read an email she sent about the crying photo blowing up and needing to capitalize on fundraising. He accused her of using the real suffering of children at the border as props for her own financial gain. Ocasio-Cortez claimed she cared deeply, but Bongino noted she had not visited a border facility once in 2 years. He pointed out she gave hundreds of interviews and raised millions, but did nothing substantive to fix the issue. He noted her inflammatory rhetoric about concentration camps put federal agents in danger and led to physical assaults on officers. He mentioned an agent who suffered brain damage because protesters were influenced by the words she used in her posts. He held up her legislative record, showing it consisted only of symbolic gestures and press releases rather than real news. He suggested she profited from the chaos, while organizations pushing for open borders donated heavily to her political PACs. He accused her of building her brand on the suffering of the people she claimed to be protecting. Bongino moved to the final section, suggesting it would be the most painful part for the people who believed in her. He discussed the Amazon headquarters project in her district, which would have brought 25,000 high-paying jobs to the community. He noted she led the opposition, calling it corporate welfare and causing the company to pull out of the deal. He then read a private email where she admitted the move was to prevent gentrification and keep her base poor. She believed that financially secure voters would not need her and would be less likely to vote for her. He accused her of deliberately killing the dreams of 25,000 families to protect her own hold on political power. She began to shake, claiming the email was being taken out of context, but she could not explain its meaning. Bongino then produced texts where she referred to her constituents in the Bronx as trained SEALs who were easy to manipulate. She claimed they would vote for her no matter what, as long as she used certain phrases and Spanish. He read a text where she called the Bronx just a brand she owned and said she would never live there. He pointed out that most of her staff were from out of state with Ivy League degrees rather than from her district. He mentioned her Hispanic outreach coordinator was from a wealthy suburb and did not even speak fluent Spanish herself. He produced a linguistic analysis of her own Spanish, suggesting it was at a tourist level rather than a native one. He described her upbringing in a wealthy suburb with country clubs, contrasting it with the struggle story she sold. He concluded that she had appropriated a community's identity and pain just to advance her own ambitious career. The energy in the room shifted as Ocasio-Cortez sat slumped in her chair, her polished image completely shattered and broken. She asked to respond, calling the hearing a political witch hunt and a coordinated attack by those afraid of her. She claimed the evidence was twisted and weaponized to silence the voice of the working class and progressive movement. She lashed out at Bongino, calling him a failed officer and a conspiracy theorist who worked for the billionaire class. Bongino then revealed that her former chief of staff had been cooperating with federal investigators for 6 months. He noted that her boyfriend and several former staff members had also given statements and provided detailed records to the FBI. He mentioned that her colleagues in the squad had already released statements distancing themselves from her and her legal troubles. They saw the evidence and chose to save their own careers, leaving her to face the consequences alone in the room. Ocasio-Cortez whispered that she was only trying to help people, but Bongino replied that she had lost her way. He suggested she started believing the rules did not apply to her because she became famous and powerful too quickly. Chairman James directed staff to prepare a formal referral to the Department of Justice for potential criminal prosecution and fraud. He recommended that the House Ethics Committee open its own investigation immediately into her conduct and financial dealings with others. The hearing adjourned with a gavel strike, and Ocasio-Cortez struggled to stand as she was surrounded by a storm of flashes. She walked out into a wall of reporters asking if she would resign or cooperate with the ongoing federal probe. Her career ended in silence as the doors closed, and the news of her downfall spread across the world. In the Bronx, Maria Gonzalez watched the news on her old television while holding a receipt for her $50 donation. She felt betrayed, noting that she had used the Congresswoman as an example of honesty and hope for her daughters. She lamented that the worst part was not the lost money, but the theft of hope from the community. Other voters across the district felt their faith collapse as they realized they had been part of a performance. Dan Bongino did one interview, stating he felt no pride in the destruction of a career, but felt it was necessary. He noted that a gifted woman had chosen arrogance and greed over service, leaving her constituents and her district with nothing. Later, he sat in his office and reflected on the pattern of politicians trading their principles for comfort and power. He realized there would always be another person who believed they were above the law and the people they served. He filed the evidence away, knowing the work of holding the powerful accountable would continue the following day as always. 3 days later, she resigned from Congress without an apology, and Maria Gonzalez finally removed the poster from her wall. Would you like me to analyze the specific campaign finance laws mentioned in this scenario?